I went to my mountain lodge to refresh and found my sister, her husband, and in-laws living there. When she called me a parasite and threatened the police, I said try it, then walked in and watched her world collapse. "What's a parasite like you doing here? Get out right now or I'm calling the police." In the living room of my mountain retreat, where the firelight danced against the timber walls, my biological sister, Lauren Mitchell, spat those words at me like venom. In her hand was the Waterford crystal tumbler I'd given her last Christmas, a thoughtful gift that now seemed like a cruel joke. Inside it swirled a 1998 Chateau Margaux, a bottle worth several $1,000s that had been aging peacefully in my wine cellar. Her lips glistened with that expensive liquid, stained deep red like evidence of a crime. "My name is Alana Pierce, and I'm 38 years old. I built my real estate empire from absolutely nothing, starting as a secretary at a small brokerage in downtown Denver, and clawing my way to the top through sheer determination and strategic investments. Now I live comfortably, financially secure, answering to no one. At work, I've earned a reputation for making clear-headed, rational decisions even under pressure. This mountain lodge is my sanctuary, the one place where I can breathe freely, where every beam and stone represents the life I've built with my own two hands. And today is Christmas Eve, the one day of the year that still holds magic for me. After finally securing a long-overdue vacation, my first real break in 18 months, I'd planned nothing more ambitious than curling up under a cashmere throw by the fire, sipping hot cocoa laced with peppermint schnapps, and letting the world fade away. That was my idea of pure luxury: silence, solitude, and peace. But as I navigated my Tesla up the winding private road leading to my lodge, a familiar vehicle caught my attention. Parked brazenly in the guest space was Lauren's white Cadillac Escalade, the very one I was still making monthly payments on. Next to it sat another vehicle, a snow-dusted Honda Accord that could only belong to her husband Bryce's parents. An uneasy chill crept down my spine that had nothing to do with the December cold. I had told no one about this trip. Absolutely no one. Sure, I'd given Lauren the code to the emergency lockbox beside the front door, but that was strictly for emergencies. Medical emergencies. Fire emergencies. Not let's throw a party in my sister's house without permission emergencies. Never, in my wildest nightmares, did I imagine she'd have the audacity to barge in uninvited with her husband's entire family and treat my home like some sort of vacation rental. Slowly, I stepped out of my car, my boots crunching on the fresh snow. I placed my gloved hand on the heavy oak door at the entrance. It wasn't locked. The moment I pushed it open, it wasn't just the warm air from the fireplace that hit me. Loud country music blared from my expensive sound system. Bursts of laughter echoed through the hallways. The heat of several bodies tangled in drunken revelry assaulted my senses all at once. In the living room were Lauren, her husband Bryce, and unmistakably his parents and two younger siblings. 7 people in total, lounged across my furniture as if they owned the place. The coffee table looked like a battlefield, scattered with turkey bones, empty bottles of Dom Perignon, and the remnants of what appeared to be my entire pantry. Their ridiculous matching Christmas sweaters were the only reminder of what night this was supposed to be. But what truly froze me in place was the sight above the fireplace. The framed photograph of my parents, the one I'd commissioned from their last vacation together in Aspen, had been shoved aside carelessly. In its place hung a large, garish family portrait of Bryce's parents surrounded by their children, all wearing forced smiles. This was no simple party. I could feel it in my gut. The room reeked of something unmistakable, the warm, stale smell of people who'd been living here for days, not hours. Even as I stood there in the doorway, they didn't notice me at first. Then Bryce, slouched arrogantly on my Italian leather sofa with his feet on my coffee table, pointed lazily in my direction. The music stopped abruptly. His mother stood up, her face registering surprise. "Oh, you must be Alana. You've returned much earlier than Bryce told us you would. How was your business trip to Singapore?" At her words, I frowned deeply. Singapore? What trip? That's when Lauren emerged from the kitchen, wine glass in hand, her face flushed from alcohol and the warmth of the fire. When she saw me standing there, her expression twisted with pure irritation, and then, with the smell of expensive wine heavy on her breath, she hurled those opening words at me. The air in the room turned ice-cold. Lauren's face was flushed crimson, a combination of the alcohol coursing through her system and the glow from the fireplace. Her outburst hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The people most stunned by her words were Bryce's parents, who exchanged horrified glances. "Lauren, how could you say such a thing to your sister?" Bryce's mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "The one who so generously lent you this beautiful mountain lodge for the holidays." In that instant, everything clicked into place like puzzle pieces forming a picture I didn't want to see. Lauren and Bryce had fabricated an elaborate lie, telling his family that I was away on an extended business trip to Asia and that I had graciously offered them the house for Christmas. They had deceived not only me but Bryce's own parents, using them as props in their little charade. "I don't recall lending this place to anyone," I said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. My voice was steady, controlled, the same tone I used when closing million-dollar deals. "And I didn't go on any trip to Singapore or anywhere else. This is my house. My property." "What did you just say?" Bryce's father turned sharply toward his son, his weathered face demanding an explanation. Bryce sat frozen on the sofa, his face draining of color as if he'd seen a ghost materialize before him. "Yes, this is my house," I repeated, taking a slow, measured breath. The icy mountain air filled my lungs as my fingers, trembling with barely contained anger, pressed into the pockets of my wool coat. I forced my voice to remain calm, professional. "So please, Lauren, go ahead. Call the police if you dare." For a brief moment, genuine fear flickered in Lauren's eyes, but she quickly masked it with a defiant smirk and snatched her iPhone from the table. "Fine. If that's what you want, I'll tell the police that this woman is trying to ruin our family Christmas. That she's harassing us." As her trembling fingers dialed 911, the room fell into an unnatural silence. Even the fire seemed to crackle more quietly. Bryce's family exchanged increasingly uneasy glances, finally realizing that this was no ordinary sibling argument. This was something far more serious. About 20 minutes later, I saw the flash of red and blue lights reflecting off the snow-covered pines outside. When I opened the door to the heavy knock, 2 Colorado State police officers stood there, both looking professional in their winter uniforms. Their experienced eyes swept over the chaotic scene inside, the scattered bottles, the displaced family photo, the guilty faces, before settling on me and Lauren with clear suspicion. "We received a 911 call about a disturbance," the taller officer said, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "What exactly is going on here?" Seizing the moment, Lauren raised her voice to a shrill pitch. "Officer, thank God you're here. This woman," she pointed at me dramatically, "she barged in out of nowhere and started threatening us. She's unstable. She's been stalking our family." "She's my sister," I interrupted calmly, keeping my tone measured and factual. "And this is my property. These people entered without my knowledge or permission." The 2 officers exchanged puzzled looks, clearly trying to piece together the situation. "That's a complete lie," Lauren screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. "This is our house. Tell them, Bryce." I sighed softly and opened the leather briefcase I always kept in my car for business emergencies. From inside, I pulled out a folder containing several key documents: the deed proving ownership of the lodge, county property tax receipts with my name, utility bills, and my Colorado driver's license. Without a word, I handed them to the taller officer. He examined each page carefully under his flashlight, his partner looking over his shoulder. The room held its collective breath. "Those are fake," Lauren shrieked. "Obviously fake. She probably printed them at Kinko's or something." But the officer's expression remained neutral, professional. After a long moment, he looked up, handed the documents back to me with a respectful nod, and turned a stern gaze toward Lauren and Bryce. He said to Lauren, his voice carrying the weight of authority, "If these documents are legitimate, and they appear to be, then this property belongs to Alana Pierce. That means you and your family are occupying this residence without the owner's consent. Under Colorado law, that constitutes criminal trespassing." At his words, the color drained completely from Lauren's face. At the same time, Bryce's mother collapsed weakly onto my sofa, her hand pressed against her forehead. "Oh my God," she whispered. "We were deceived by our own son and his wife. We had no idea. Miss Pierce, I'm so terribly, terribly sorry." She apologized with genuine remorse, her voice trembling with shame and guilt. I could see the humiliation written across her face, the realization that her son had used her as an unwitting accomplice in this violation. I accepted her apology with a slight nod, then spoke firmly, without hesitation. "Thank you for your words, Mrs. Patterson. I appreciate your sincerity. However, whether you were deceived or not is no longer my primary concern. The fact remains that your family occupied my most private, personal space without my permission. And worst of all," I paused, letting my gaze settle on Lauren, "because you were here, I endured the worst humiliation of my life. Being called a parasite by my own sister in my own home." My voice grew colder. "For that reason alone, I cannot and will not allow you to remain in this house 1 minute longer." Bryce flailed, stammering desperately. "Look, we were just trying to have a nice Christmas with family. We didn't think. Because we are family, we should be allowed to use it." Lauren shouted as a last-ditch protest, her voice rising to near hysteria. "We are blood-related sisters. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" At that, the officer shook his head with what looked like genuine disbelief. "Unfortunately, family ties don't give you legal rights to someone else's property. That's not how the law works." He turned to me. "Miss Pierce, what would you like us to do? Do you want these individuals removed from the premises?" All eyes in the room stabbed into me like daggers. Lauren's eyes were wet with a mixture of anger, humiliation, and dawning panic. I stared back at Lauren steadily, and for a moment, an image flashed through my mind. Our mother on her deathbed at Mercy Hospital 3 years ago, her hand gripping mine with surprising strength for someone so frail. "Lauren is still so naive, so dreamy," Mom had whispered, her voice barely audible over the beeping monitors. "Please, Alana. Please support her so she doesn't lose her way. Promise me." Those had been among her last coherent words. To honor that deathbed promise, I had supported Lauren through everything: her impulsive decisions, her wasteful spending, Bryce's constant career failures and get-rich-quick schemes. It wasn't weakness on my part. It was what I believed to be my duty as the older sister, the successful one, the one who had her life together. I was protecting the only family I had left in this world. But I had reached my absolute limit. The word parasite had shattered something fundamental inside me. I nodded quietly to the officer. "Yes. I want all of them to leave my property immediately." "Then please gather your belongings," the officer said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You have 15 minutes. The living room filled with despairing sighs and muttered curses. Amid the chaos, I calmly took out my smartphone and unlocked it with my fingerprint. The blue-white glow of the screen illuminated my composed face in the dim room. The movement of Lauren and the others, who had reluctantly begun stuffing items into bags, stopped abruptly. Every single person in the room fixed their gaze on the phone in my hand, sensing that something significant was about to happen. The app one had opened was my premium banking application, the one I used for managing my extensive real estate portfolio and investments. Without addressing anyone in particular, yet speaking clearly enough for everyone to hear, I began narrating my actions step by step, my voice clinical and detached. "First, Lauren, the apartment you're living in on Colfax Avenue. You know, the 2-bedroom with the mountain views." I tapped the screen. "That's one of the properties in my portfolio. If I rented it at current Denver market rates, it would fetch $2,800 a month easily. But I let you have it for $600, barely enough to cover the HOA fees and basic maintenance. I did that because I believed it was my final responsibility as your sister, fulfilling the promise I made to Mom." I paused, letting that sink in. "That privilege ends tonight. Effective immediately." When I tapped the confirmation button, a cold, sterile digital chime echoed through the silent room. Lauren dropped the Christmas ornament she'd been holding. It shattered on the hardwood floor. You're joking, right?" Her voice trembled, barely above a whisper. "Alana, you can't be serious." "Next," I continued, ignoring her completely. I turned my gaze directly toward Bryce's parents, who sat hunched on the sofa looking like they wanted the earth to swallow them. "Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, the comfortable apartment you're currently living in over in Aurora, do you remember how you secured that place?" They said nothing, just stared at me with growing dread. "I found that property myself using my real estate expertise and industry connections. I negotiated your lease personally, got you a preferential rate, and I signed on as your guarantor when the landlord was hesitant about your credit score. I did that because I believed that a stable home for you would ultimately benefit your son, and by extension, my sister. I invested my reputation in you." Bryce's parents averted their eyes, unable to meet my gaze, weighed down by crushing guilt. I looked back down at my screen. That's also why I provided the vehicle. The Escalade parked outside. I scrolled through my auto loan account. Lauren came to me in tears 18 months ago, saying your parents desperately needed a reliable car for medical appointments and grocery shopping. She begged me. So I covered the entire down payment, $12,000, and I've been making the $847 monthly payments ever since. My voice grew harder, sharper. And now you use that very car to break into my home, throw an unauthorized party, and Lauren calls me a parasite. What a perfect, twisted joke. I tapped the screen again. This loan payment? Cancelled. Tomorrow morning, first thing, I'll be contacting Rocky Mountain Auto Finance to have the vehicle repossessed. I believe they're quite efficient. The merciless electronic confirmation sound rang out. No, not the car. Lauren's voice broke. Alana, that's my car. I need it. Actually, I said coldly, it's my car. I paid for it. My name is on the loan documents. You just drive it. Bryce tried to say something, opening and closing his mouth like a fish gasping for air, but no words emerged. His father could only stare at me in stunned, horrified silence, finally understanding the full extent of what his son and daughter-in-law had done. After completing every transaction, I turned off the phone screen with a decisive click. Then, for the first time since entering the house, I met my sister's frozen eyes head-on. What I saw there wasn't anger anymore. It was pure, undiluted fear. The fear of someone watching their entire world crumble in real time. The moment you called me a parasite, I said quietly, each word deliberate, I made my decision. The total amount I've given you over the past 5 years, in direct payments, subsidized rent, car payments, emergency loans that were never repaid, easily exceeds $85,000. Probably closer to 6 figures if I tallied everything. I paused, letting that staggering number hang in the air. But from this moment forward, I will not spend another single cent on you. Not $1. Not one dime. You're on your own, Lauren. Completely and utterly on your own. Lauren's lips quivered as if she wanted to speak, but no words came out. All her arrogance, all her entitlement, it was gone, replaced only by the cold terror of facing a reality she'd never had to confront before. A reality where she actually had to take care of herself. Bryce simply stared at the floor in silence, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Bryce's parents and siblings hurriedly gathered their coats and bags, as if trying to flee from a natural disaster. They no longer made any attempt to defend Lauren and Bryce. From their hunched postures and frantic movements, it was crystal clear they only wanted to escape this nightmare as quickly as humanly possible. One of the officers gently tapped the shoulders of Lauren and Bryce, who still stood frozen like statues. Come on, you two. The snow's getting heavier outside. If you don't move soon, the mountain roads will be completely impassable. You'll be stuck here, and that won't be pleasant for anyone. The other officer turned a stern, no-nonsense gaze toward Bryce. I don't know how all of you got up here, but I assume someone drove. Is anyone sober enough to get back down that winding mountain road safely? Because if every single one of you has been drinking, you'll be spending tonight in county jail for DUI instead of just trespassing. At that warning, Bryce's father awkwardly raised his hand like a schoolboy. I haven't had anything to drink, officer. I'll take responsibility for driving everyone home safely. The officer studied him skeptically for a moment, as if trying to determine if he was telling the truth, then gave a curt nod. Good. Then get moving. Now. At those words, Lauren suddenly lurched forward, clinging to one last desperate thread of hope. She tried to rush toward me, her arms outstretched. Alana, please. Please think this through. It's Christmas Eve. You can't just throw us out into a blizzard like this. We could freeze. Please, I'm begging you. Before she could reach me, the first officer caught her firmly by the arm and stopped her advance. That's enough. If you cause any more trouble or try to make physical contact, We'll have to take you in for obstruction of justice and possibly assault. Do you understand?" That final warning broke her completely. Lauren nearly collapsed, her legs giving out, but Bryce caught her just in time, holding her trembling body upright. Together, they picked up their coats and bags from the wreckage of their party, the spilled wine, the torn decorations, the scattered plates of half-eaten food, and with their heads bowed like convicted criminals, they slowly shuffled toward the door. Just before stepping outside into the cold, Lauren turned around one last time and glared at me with eyes that held an unsettling mixture of pure hatred and desperate pleading. She looked like she wanted to say something that might change my mind, some magic words that would reverse everything. I met her gaze without a flicker of emotion, my face an impassive mask. The heavy oak door closed with a definitive thud that echoed through the suddenly silent room. At last, blessed silence returned to my mountain lodge. The officers tipped their hats politely. "Sorry for the trouble. Merry Christmas. Call us if there are any further problems." "Thank you, officers. Merry Christmas to you as well." After they left, I stood alone in the middle of the ruined living room. Only the fireplace continued to flicker softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls as if nothing unusual had happened. Through the window, I watched the red and blue lights of the police cruiser fade into the distance, swallowed by the falling snow and darkness. I exhaled a long, heavy breath that seemed to carry years of accumulated tension. As the adrenaline finally drained from my system, my whole body began to feel impossibly heavy, like every muscle had turned to lead. I sank deep into the leather sofa and closed my eyes, listening to the crackling of the fire and the howling wind outside. Just a few hours ago, I had been driving up this mountain with nothing but anticipation for a peaceful Christmas holiday. And now that innocent excitement felt like a memory from another lifetime, another person. The coffee table before me was still littered with the remnants of their chaos, dirty plates smeared with gravy, half-empty glasses with lipstick stains, and the pitiful picked-apart skeleton of what had been a beautiful roasted turkey. I reached out and picked up the Waterford tumbler Lauren had been using, the one I'd given her for her 30th birthday. It still held a red wine stain at the bottom, dark as dried blood. As I stared at that stain, memories began flooding my mind like a river breaking through a dam. When our parents passed away within 3 years of each other, Dad from a sudden heart attack, Mom from cancer, I was 32, working 70-hour weeks trying to establish my real estate business. Lauren, still in college at CU Boulder, had lost the two people she depended on most and became emotionally unstable, nearly dropping out in her junior year. Seeing her spiral like that, I had made a promise. From now on, Lauren, I'll be your family. I'll take care of you. You won't be alone. That promise had eventually become a chain around my neck, growing heavier with each passing year. Even after graduating with a degree in marketing, Lauren refused to find steady employment. "I wasn't born to sit in some cubicle, Alana," she'd say with an airy wave of her hand. "I meant to live a more creative, fulfilling life. I'm an artist at heart." After she married Bryce 3 years ago, her attitude didn't change one bit. If anything, it got worse. Bryce worked in sales for a medical equipment company, but his performance was consistently mediocre, and his income alone couldn't come close to supporting Lauren's shopping addiction and taste for luxury. So naturally, I began subsidizing their rent. "Just until we get back on our feet," Lauren had promised tearfully. "Just 6 months, maybe a year." That temporary arrangement had somehow stretched into 3 full years. When Lauren came to me 18 months ago with tears streaming down her face, saying, "Bryce's parents are getting older, and they have no way to get to their doctor appointments or buy groceries. They need a car, Alana. Please, they're practically invalids without one," I had given in again, against my better judgment. In the end, I paid the massive down payment for that luxury Escalade and covered every single monthly payment since. It wasn't kindness. It wasn't generosity. It was a calculated investment to prevent future excuses, to cut off one avenue they might use to come begging for more money under the guise of elder care responsibility. I placed the glass back on the table and added fresh logs to the dying fire. The flames roared back to life with a crackling snap, filling the room with warmth and flickering light. As I listened to the fire, I found myself asking a question I'd avoided for years. When exactly had our relationship become so poisonous, so twisted? I had always believed I was acting out of love and duty, honoring my promise to our dying mother, fulfilling my responsibility as the older, more successful sister. But perhaps, in the end, I was the one who had turned Lauren into someone fundamentally incapable of standing on her own 2 feet. Maybe I was the one who had crippled her. She had always been clever in her own manipulative way. Whenever she wanted something, she weaponized tears and emotional appeals. And whenever things went wrong, she was a master at finding someone else to blame. Our parents when they were alive, circumstances, bad luck, and now me. Every single time our parents gave in to her demands, I watched and learned the pattern. Eventually, I started doing the same thing. When she married Bryce, I secretly harbored hope that he would succeed where I had failed. I hoped he would be the one to ground her, to teach her responsibility, to say no when it needed to be said. But that hope shattered in the most pathetic way imaginable. Bryce was even weaker than Lauren, a man who feared confrontation and change, who preferred the comfortable path of least resistance. Rather than curb her spending and push her to work, he actively enabled it, using her indulgence to mask his own professional inadequacies and failures. In front of me, he always wore that same apologetic, hangdog expression and said, "We are truly grateful for everything you've done, Alana. We really are. We'll pay you back." But those words were never, ever followed by action or change. Together, they had leaned on me like parasites feeding off a host, taking everything while giving nothing but resentment in return. And when Lauren called me a parasite in my own home, surrounded by my stolen wine and uninvited guests, that wasn't a drunken slip of the tongue. That was her truth, finally. Spoken aloud without the usual sugarcoating. There had never been a shred of genuine gratitude in her heart. Only entitlement. Only contempt for the person who provided everything. All this time, I had willfully looked away from that ugly reality. Maybe I was simply afraid of losing the last thread connecting me to family, afraid of being completely alone in the world. But now there was no turning back. The thread had been cut, and I felt lighter. What I had severed that night wasn't just financial support. I had cut away the illusion, the curse disguised as family obligation. For a brief moment, I wondered how they were doing in this exact moment. Most likely, they had taken refuge at Bryce's parents' place in Aurora, crowding into that modest 3-bedroom house. But that arrangement wouldn't last long. Charlotte, no, Lauren, with her self-centered nature and inflated sense of entitlement, would never be able to swallow her pride enough to live harmoniously under someone else's roof, following someone else's rules. What awaited them now was harsh, unforgiving reality, one where they would finally have to stand on their own 2 feet or fall. Every bill I had once covered would come crashing down on them simultaneously. Rent, car payments, utilities, groceries, and most devastating of all, Lauren's pride. The pride of a woman who had grown addicted to a luxury lifestyle without ever earning a single dollar of it herself. Her carefully constructed world would begin crumbling, starting tonight. And I would be here in my silent mountain sanctuary, simply watching it happen from a comfortable distance. When Christmas morning arrived, it was as if that chaotic night had never existed. The mountains were wrapped in perfect stillness and endless white. Fresh snow had covered every trace of tire tracks and footprints. My phone remained powered off. For the first time in years, maybe since before our parents died, I was beginning a true holiday, one genuinely free from interruption, from obligation, from guilt. I spent the following week in complete seclusion at the cabin, wrapped in peaceful solitude. I read thick novels by the fire while gazing out at the pristine snow. I cooked elaborate meals just for myself, pan-seared salmon, homemade pasta, dishes I never had time to prepare during my hectic work schedule. At night, I watched classic films with a proper glass of wine in hand, savoring both the movie and the silence. I tried not to think about Lauren and the others. Actually, that's not quite accurate. There was no need to think about them anymore. Their future, their problems, their drama, none of it was my concern any longer. That realization brought a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. When my vacation ended and I returned to my downtown Denver office, reality was already waiting for me with open arms. As I settled into my desk chair and skimmed through the stack of reports and messages that had accumulated, my office phone rang. It was Janet from the property management company that handled my rental portfolio. "Miss Pierce, this is regarding Lauren Mitchell and her husband, Bryce Patterson." Janet's voice carried a note of hesitation. "We still haven't received their January rent payment, and we haven't been able to reach them by phone or email. The payment is now 6 days overdue." I glanced at the calendar on my computer screen. She was right. I see, I said evenly, my voice betraying nothing. Please proceed with the standard protocol outlined in the lease agreement. Issue the formal payment demand notice and begin the eviction process according to Colorado law. No extensions. No exceptions whatsoever. I understand, Miss Pierce. There was a pause. Are you certain? I know that she's I'm certain, Janet. Treat this like any other delinquent tenant. That's all. I ended the call before she could say anything else. Janet probably knew I'd been renting to my sister at a heavily subsidized rate, but I offered no explanation, no justification. This was business now, not family. That same afternoon, I received an email from Mountain States Auto Finance. The subject line read, Vehicle repossession completed, account number 847392. I opened the attached file to find a photograph of the white Escalade parked on a snowy street in Aurora, hitched to a tow truck, about to be hauled away. The image was clinical, matter-of-fact. I dragged the email directly to my trash folder and returned to reviewing property listings. There wasn't a single drop of emotion in me, no second thoughts, no guilt. The gears of their collapse had begun turning, and they were moving faster and more precisely than even I had anticipated. A few days later, on a Friday evening, I was relaxing in my downtown loft apartment with a glass of Pinot Noir when my phone lit up with an incoming call from an unknown Colorado number. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail. I get dozens of spam calls weekly, but something made me hesitate. Some instinct made me press the answer button. Hello? I said cautiously. Alana, it's me. A weak, strained voice came through, barely recognizable. Lauren's voice. It was the first time I'd heard it since that confrontation at the lodge. What do you want, Lauren? My tone was ice-cold, deliberately unwelcoming. I heard her inhale sharply, gathering courage. How could you do this to us? It's so cruel. You kicked us out. You took away the car. You're evicting us from our apartment. What are we supposed to do now? How are we supposed to survive? Her voice grew more frantic, more desperate with every word. We are staying at Bryce's parents' house, and it's absolutely unbearable. His mother throws passive-aggressive comments at me every single day. She blames me for everything. And Bryce won't even defend me. He just sits there and lets her attack me. He blames me too. You brought this entirely on yourself, I said flatly, feeling nothing. You're facing the natural consequences of your own choices and actions. None of this is my concern anymore. Not your concern. Her voice rose sharply. You're the one who cut everything off. You're the one who destroyed our lives. Don't you feel even a little bit responsible for what's happening to us? Responsible? I actually laughed, a short, bitter sound. Don't make me laugh, Lauren. I'm not your mother. You're 32 years old. Isn't it past time you learned to take care of yourself like every other adult in America? That seemed to shatter what little pride and composure she had left. You don't understand, she screamed into the phone, her voice cracking. There's no way we can survive on Bryce's pathetic salary alone. He's completely useless. He talks big about his sales numbers and promotions, but nothing ever happens. He never delivers. He never provides anything. Then I heard it, a muffled male voice in the background, anger rising. What did you just say? It was Bryce, apparently standing close enough to hear every word of her tirade. Wait, Bryce, I didn't mean, Lauren gasped. But it's true, isn't it? Bryce's voice exploded. It's true because you burn through every single dollar I make like it's water. You spend money we don't have on things we don't need. His shout was so loud it cut sharply through the phone line, making me wince. Whose fault do you think it is that we are living like this? Whose fault, Lauren? Their argument erupted in full force, screaming, blaming, hurling vicious accusations at each other. The sound of two people who had finally stopped pretending, tearing each other apart with the truth. I listened to their ugly fight without feeling anything at all. No satisfaction, no sympathy, nothing. Then a loud crash echoed through the phone, something expensive hitting the floor and shattering, and suddenly the line went dead. I quietly set my phone down on the coffee table and took a long sip of wine. The second act of their collapse had begun, right on schedule. This time, they were destroying each other. 2 more weeks passed after that explosive phone call. Lauren never reached out again. I heard nothing from Bryce's family. Silence. Blissful silence. In the weeks following that stormy Christmas, I remained focused on my work and my own peace of mind. My mountain lodge became my regular weekend retreat again, a place of genuine tranquility. The snow outside buried the noise and chaos of the outside world, and with it, every unpleasant memory. Meanwhile, their world continued crumbling faster and more completely than I had expected. When I checked in with my property management company, the reports came in calm, factual, and relentless, like clockwork. Eviction notice served due to non-payment of rent. Tenant has vacated the premises, left the apartment in poor condition. Former tenant has not provided a forwarding address. Through my network of contacts in Denver's real estate community, bits of information filtered back to me. Lauren had been stripped of her comfortable lifestyle and was now living in some cheap extended-stay motel near the airport, the kind of place that rents by the week and doesn't ask too many questions. She was being scorned daily by Bryce's family, who made it clear she was no longer welcome under their roof. And Bryce had finally lost all patience. Once my financial safety net vanished, once the illusion of stability I'd provided disappeared, he found himself face to face with his wife's refusal to work and her continued insistence on a lifestyle they couldn't afford. The mask had come off for both of them. According to Janet at the property management company, who heard it from a mutual acquaintance, Bryce had officially filed for divorce at the Denver County Courthouse. There would be no alimony, no division of assets, because there was literally nothing left to divide. Just debt, broken promises, and bitter resentment. I merely watched it all unfold from a distance, like observing a car crash in slow motion. I felt no need to intervene, no desire to help, no guilt whatsoever. One day in early April, as spring began showing its gentle face across Colorado and the mountain snow finally started melting, I was at the lodge enjoying a rare midweek break when my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but something told me to answer. Alana. The voice on the other end was thin, frail, almost unrecognizable. But I knew who it was. Lauren. What do you want? I asked, my voice neutral. I'm sorry. The words came out choked, barely audible. I was wrong about everything. About what I said, about how I acted, about all of it. Please, Alana. Please just give me one more chance. We're sisters, aren't we? Doesn't that mean something? Doesn't blood count for anything? I looked out the window at the peaceful spring scenery, wildflowers beginning to bloom, birds returning, new life emerging everywhere. I drew in a slow, deep breath of fresh mountain air. Lauren, I said calmly, I'm going to give you one last piece of advice. The only free advice you'll ever get from me again. What? Her voice carried a desperate hope. What is it? I'll do anything. The next time you find yourself in trouble, I interrupted, my voice steady and final, don't call me. Call the police officers, just like you did that Christmas Eve. Who knows? Maybe this time they'll actually take your side. That was the last thing I ever said to my sister. Before she could respond, before she could beg or cry or try to manipulate me one more time, I ended the call and immediately added her number to my permanent block list. I sat there for a moment in the quiet lodge, listening to the sound of melting snow dripping from the roof, the distant call of a hawk, the whisper of wind through the pine trees. I felt peaceful. Truly peaceful for the first time in years. There are no more parasites in my life now. None. I had cut away the dead weight, the toxic relationships disguised as family obligations, the guilt disguised as love. And what remained was something I hadn't experienced since before my parents died, genuine freedom. From this moment forward, I would fully embrace the life I had earned through my own hard work and determination. The quiet mornings at the lodge. The success of my business. The beauty of the mountains. And most importantly, a life that was finally, completely, authentically mine. I poured myself a glass of wine, not the expensive vintage Lauren had stolen, but a perfectly good local Colorado wine that I'd chosen myself. I raised it in a silent toast to no one in particular. To freedom, I whispered to the empty room. And to never looking back. The fire crackled its agreement. Outside, spring continued its inevitable arrival. And inside, I smiled, a real, genuine smile, for the first time since Christmas. My phone sat on the table, silent and peaceful. No desperate calls. No guilt-tripping messages. No demands disguised as emergencies. Just silence. And that silence, I realized, was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in years. I spent the rest of that April weekend doing exactly what I wanted, hiking through the awakening forest, reading on the deck in the afternoon sunshine, cooking a simple dinner just for myself, and sleeping deeply without anxiety or worry disturbing my dreams. When Monday came and I drove back to Denver, I felt lighter than I had in years. At the office, I threw myself into new projects with renewed energy and focus. Without the constant drain of Lauren's crises and financial demands, I found myself thriving in ways I hadn't realized were possible. My business expanded. I closed 3 major commercial deals in as many months. I hired 2 new agents to handle the growing client list. I even started mentoring young women in real estate, teaching them the skills and mindset needed to build their own empires from nothing, just as I had done. Life moved forward, as it always does, with or without the people we thought were essential to it. Occasionally, I would hear fragments of news through the grapevine. Denver's real estate community is smaller than people think, and gossip travels fast. Lauren had apparently moved from that airport motel to an even cheaper place in Commerce City. She'd finally gotten a job, working retail at a big box store for minimum wage. Bryce's divorce had been finalized. He'd moved to Arizona for a fresh start, leaving behind the wreckage of his Colorado life. Each time I heard these updates, I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, not regret. Just nothing. They were strangers now, their stories no longer connected to mine. Summer arrived, then fall. The seasons changed as they always do in Colorado, each one more beautiful than the last. I celebrated my 39th birthday alone at the lodge with an excellent bottle of wine and a gourmet meal I'd prepared myself: pan-seared duck breast with cherry reduction, wild rice, and roasted vegetables from the local farmer's market. It was perfect. As December approached and Christmas drew near once again, I found myself back at the lodge for the holidays. This time, there were no surprise visitors, no stolen wine, no family portraits replacing my parents' photograph above the fireplace. Just peace. Just quiet. Just exactly what I had always wanted. On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after that terrible confrontation, I sat by the fire with my hot cocoa, wrapped in my favorite blanket, and reflected on how dramatically my life had transformed. Cutting Lauren out hadn't destroyed me. It had freed me. The guilt I'd carried for years, the sense of obligation that had weighed on my shoulders like a physical burden, it was all gone now. In its place was something I'd forgotten could exist: contentment. I raised my mug in another silent toast. "Thank you, Lauren," I whispered to the crackling fire. "Thank you for calling me a parasite. Thank you for showing me exactly who you really were. Because you gave me the greatest gift of all, you gave me permission to let you go." The fire popped and sparked, sending tiny embers dancing up the chimney. Outside, fresh snow began to fall, covering the world in pristine white, making everything clean and new again. My phone sat on the side table, fully charged but blissfully silent. No blocked calls attempting to get through. No voicemails from unknown numbers. Lauren had finally gotten the message. Or perhaps she'd simply run out of ways to reach me, run out of energy to keep trying. Either way, the result was the same: freedom. I thought about my mother's dying words, that promise I'd made to support Lauren, to keep her from losing her way. For years, I'd interpreted that as a mandate to enable her, to rescue her from every consequence, to cushion her from reality. But now, with distance and clarity, I understood something different. Maybe the best way to support someone isn't to catch them every time they fall. Maybe sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and let them hit the ground. Let them feel the impact. Let them learn that actions have consequences and that the world doesn't owe them anything. Perhaps, in some strange way, cutting Lauren off was the truest form of love I could offer. Not the comfortable love that enables and destroys, but the hard love that forces growth and self-reliance. Or perhaps I was just rationalizing, and the simple truth was this: I had finally chosen myself. After years of sacrificing my peace, my money, and my dignity for someone who saw me as nothing more than an ATM with a heartbeat, I had finally said enough. And that was okay. It was more than okay. It was necessary. As the snow continued to fall outside and the fire burned warm inside, I opened my laptop and began browsing through photos from the past year. Pictures from successful business deals, celebrations with colleagues who appreciated me, quiet moments at the lodge, a solo trip to Napa Valley I'd taken in October just because I could. Every single photo showed the same thing: me, genuinely smiling. Not the tight, stressed smile I'd worn for years while juggling Lauren's crises. Not the fake smile I'd plastered on while writing yet another check I couldn't really afford. But real smiles. Happy smiles. The smile of a woman who had finally reclaimed her own life. I closed the laptop and settled deeper into the sofa, pulling the blanket up to my chin. The lodge was warm and comfortable, filled with my things, decorated according to my taste, peaceful in ways that only a truly personal sanctuary can be. This was my Christmas. My lodge. My life. My choice. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, everything was exactly as it should be. The fire burned low as midnight approached. I added one final log, watching the flames leap up and embrace the new wood, transforming it into warmth and light. Outside, the snow continued its silent work, covering the world in white, burying the old year's footprints and mistakes, preparing the ground for whatever would come next. I smiled, closed my eyes, and let the peace wash over me completely. There are no more parasites in my life. Only freedom. Only possibility. Only me. And that, I realized as sleep began to claim me, was more than enough. It was everything.